Hello everyone, I thought it was time to do another Mountain Ramble episode. So this is episode 2 of an occasional series where I'm going to go through my massive mountain of unpainted lead figures, and while I'm doing it, just ramble and update you on various things and talk about anything that comes to mind. And today I haven't picked a box, one of my storage boxes. I picked out this old cardboard box. It's full of figures deliberately. You'll see why in a minute. Because first subject I want to talk about is I've just come back the other day from visiting Selwig, the South East London War Games Group show at Crystal Palace, which I really enjoyed. I've only been to it once before, and I thought this year, as I had such a good time up in London, I stayed for a couple of days and went to Salute, and as I had such a not miserable time, but I didn't really enjoy warfare at Reading very much last year. That was held in November. I thought I would kind of change my habit and go back to London, stay in London a few days in October, and go to Selwig instead of warfare. And I made the right choice. It was a really good show. Bumped into a lot of people, something I want to talk about in a minute. But I wanted to show you my purchases as well, because one of the topics I wanted to carry on with this theme that I had in the last episode about why we hoard and so on. And you'll see I was very good in that I only purchased books and rules and so on, didn't purchase any figures, so I haven't added to the Lead Mountain. But having purchased these books, there was a huge temptation to do so. So I managed to get 2 Osprey books on the subject of the Crimean War. This one is a very old one. Had to pay £10 for it. I suppose that's not bad. Probably pay about that for a new one now. But this is the British Army in Crimea, of the Crimea. So this preceded the book that I do have, which is, I think it's called something like Queen Victoria's Armies on Campaign. So that's going to be helpful. But the one that I was really glad to get hold of was this one. This cost me £15. The Russian Army of the Crimean War. And had I had this the other day, I wouldn't have had the issue of knowing what colour to paint the Thrashkas, because they're quite clearly dark green and not the grey-brown that, what was his name, Wilkinson Latham says in his book. So that's going to come in. I am about to start painting my Russian figures up soon, so that will come in very handy for that. And on the subject of painting, I also purchased 3 pots of paint from Magister Militum. They're not particularly superior quality paints, these, but ever since I started purchasing them, I found the need to kind of replace them as they run out, because they're standard colours such as wood and so on, and soil. I like to kind of reproduce what I painted before. I've got a bit of uniformity, so I've got those. So that paint will help to get the Lead Mountain down. There is a figure here. I didn't pay for it. It came free with Black Powder 2, which I had to have. I thought I'd hold out until visiting Crystal Palace and not order it through the post. But yeah, I wasn't really one of those people who thought that there needed to be a second edition of Black Powder. I was perfectly happy with the previous set of rules. But this hasn't changed the rules a vast amount. to be honest, I didn't really think the changes were necessary. Um, One of the things in here that they say they changed was that people were never kind of got to grips with the how you rolled for the commanders and so on, and got those rules wrong. And I never had a problem with that, but they seem to think that was a particular reason. And the book's been kind of re-stylized and so on, laid out in a different way that's apparently more readable. But again, I didn't think there was much wrong with the other one. But anyway, I needed it. I've got it. Something else I meant to say about it that I've forgotten. Enough on that. Anyway, but they came with a free figure, so I have marginally added to the lead mountain. It's you can't see it in there, but it's a figure of Lucky Jack Aubrey from Master and Commander. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but there we go. He'll get painted one day. I got this Lawrence and the Arab Revolts from the Bring and Buy. This only cost me £3. I don't wargame the period, but this is what I was saying about how some of these purchases can lead me on to adding to my lead mountain, because it's another conflict that's always appealed in terms of wargaming. So I'm aware of a few ranges that do figures for this conflict, so might get around to wargaming that one day. But anyway, it was going cheap on the Bring and Buy, so thought I'd snap it up. I also, and here we go, this is where you'll see the reason why I got that particular box out of them. I got a couple of sets of rules from Peter Pig. Now, square bashing, I've got a very old edition of this. It's been revised and revamped. I purchased it as a possible set of rules to wargame the Russian Civil War with, and they do have army lists for the Russians. Not in here. They've now got a separate book of army lists, which I didn't think was worth buying really, because if you're gonna wargame the Russian Civil War, what's the point of getting army lists for I don't know, for Ottoman Turks at the Dardanelles or whatever. But the thing, they're a bit strange, Peter Pig, in that I really rate some of their rules. In particular, I really enjoy AK-47, which is a modern African Wars game. I play Hammer in Iron, which is an American Civil War Riverine set of rules. Another one as well that slips my mind at the moment. But a large number of their rules are based on this grid system. So literally square bashing. You divide a 4 foot by 6 table up into 6-inch squares. So you need to have some way of marking the table and delineating the grid. And there's something about that I just makes me hesitate a little bit about the rules. And you're actually playing almost like a sort of big game of chess with forces dominating particular squares and so on, and firing along vertical and horizontal lines and so forth. It's something that kind of, I have reservations about it, but in terms of the First World War, I think it's a reasonable thing to do, because the war was such a it was on such a grand scale. It kind of makes sense just to move your units around and they're dominating particular areas, rather than having them come into direct contact and collide and so on. And anyway, I think it makes sense for World War One, but they do extend it into other areas. So there's got the poor bloody infantry. A set of rules for the Second World War is based on a grid, and this one here, which I've had my eye on, It's their Western set of rules, and this is on a grid as well. Now, they did have a previous set of rules called Hey You in the Jail, something like that. This is a completely new set of rules. They've scrapped their old set, and this is new. This has only been out, I think this came out this year sometime. And it caught my eye. I thought I would get the rules and then maybe think about getting some figures. Again, you see it's leading me on to buying more figures. They had a demo game of it. It looked really good. It looked really good. They had a demo game at the show. It looked good. One of the things I think it was Palmer was that Heresy Productions was talking about finding a Western set of rules that was bigger than Skirmish, and that's exactly what this is. It's it's based on groups. They don't call them factions; they call them forces. But you field a force of U.S. cavalry, Native Americans, Mexicans, that kind of thing. And so the force size is about 50 figures per side, maybe greater. And again, you're moving around on a grid. And I thought I'd get it anyway. Think about getting some armies, so it's there in my library. And then I didn't get this at the show, but this was waiting for me when I got home. Well, at least the card saying they tried to deliver it was. I went out and picked it up today. This is the new game, or the new set of rules from Wargamer Poland, which is called Task Force. There we go, Task Force. And this is sort of aimed at the level in between skirmish and divisional level. So it's quite handy. It's a handy intermediate level because there's a big jump from playing by fire and sword using just the skirmish level size of forces, and then going up to divisional level. There's a lot of painting to do. So this is an intermediate stage, which is good. It was necessary, but it's also a more rapid play type of set of rules. So they've simplified a lot of the rules, which is going to be brilliant, I think. I think this will do really well. And it's up to the usual standard of production. Really nice illustrations and photos in here. So, carry on painting my all my unpainted by fire and sword figures, and again another free figure. This is a Polish hetman. I think I said on an earlier video that it would come in handy as a Cossack hetman, but this is Janusz Radziwiłł, who was a Polish hetman. But I have got a small Polish, unpainted of course, Polish force, so he can go with them. Right, so let's start to take you through the lead mountain. Now, as I say, I've picked this specifically because I've got an awful lot of unpainted Peter Pig figures, and in this first bag there are ancient Egyptians, and it's a mix. They're not entirely Peter Pig. There's a lot of chariot miniatures from Magister Militum. Let's try and zoom in a little bit now. So these ones are. I know this is going to be a constant refrain. I will get around to painting them someday. But I've got quite a lot of Magister Militum Egyptian figures there. Peter Pig do have a set. I've never played it. They do have a set of ancient rules called Conquerors and Kings. You can buy box sets. They come in these black boxes, box set of armies. Then when I purchased these New Kingdom Egyptians, they cost been £95, and I've hardly painted any of them. I have to admit, one of the reasons for that's the whole bag there, as you can see, but is that I really like the infantry. There's some marchers there, but I'm not keen on their chariots, and it was really the chariots that drew me into painting Egyptians in the first place. I don't know if you can see, try and get one visible. Bear with me for a minute. Right, yeah, here's an example. You can see on there the chariot is solid. It doesn't look like the sort of light kind of racy type of chariot that the Egyptians drove. The ones with that's a sort of frame that has lots of gaps in the frame and is springy. This to me looks more like something you'd associate with, I don't know, the Greeks or something like that. And that's a bit of a shame, and there's an awful lot of them, and it, as I say, it did put me off, so I painted up all my chariots from Magister Militum and used those instead. And I was thinking about swapping over the riders and drivers on it and so on, the warriors on it, because they are actually quite nice, but it's the actual body of the chariot itself that puts me off them. But eventually, same refrain, I will get around to painting them someday. Another curious thing about Peter Pig and their ancients is that they don't seem to have matching armies, opposing armies. They do Romans, and they are Imperial Romans, but for the kind of early part of the 2nd century, so about the year 200. Then they do Parthians, who I thought were a little bit later than that. I thought the Parthians were about 300. I might be wrong in that. They do these Egyptians, who are New Kingdom Egyptians, a completely different period. And they do one other, I think they do one other as well. I can't remember, it escapes me. It's something like, I know they've got camels in it, so maybe it's Nubians or Libyans or something. So maybe they could be opponents suddenly to the ancient Egyptians. Anyway, so that is, they are my ancient Egyptian Peter Pig figures, and as I say, I've never tried out Conquerors and Kings, so I can't comment on what they're like as a set of rules. I've got another box here of some more Magister Militum. And these are some of the chariots that I have yet to paint, but that's exactly the kind of frame. I think you can see that. Very light, a much lighter frame with gaps. So that's the sort of chariots I like. You can see how many I've still got to paint. Just got masses and masses of them. Let's talk a little bit about Selwig as well, still, because there's a number of one of the curious coincidences, but I first put up this lead mounting as a sort of speeded up video, and a couple of people got in touch and said, can you slow it down and show us your figures in more detail? And at the time it wasn't worth doing because there was hours and hours of it, and my internet connection just wasn't up to uploading a long video. It would have taken days to upload. But one of the people that remarked was a guy called Terry Druitt, and he actually was at Selwig. It was quite amazing. He is the first person, the first non-YouTuber, or the first non-YouTube channel owner. So if he's on YouTube just as a viewer, that's what I mean. Doesn't have his own channel, but he is the first person to ever recognise me from my channel and come up and say hello, which was brilliant. So that was Terry Druitt, and he partly prompted this rerun of my Lead Mountain. He was one of them, and another guy who did that, who left a comment saying, "Now that I've got a better internet connection, can I show it all again?" was a chap called Ian, who's over in Australia, and he has just started putting up videos. So he has now got a YouTube channel. It's changed its name a couple of times already, but at the moment it's called put it down here somewhere, BWA Club Nemesis. He's up to 6 subscribers at the moment. He's got some interesting armies to show. It's worth taking a look at his channel and subscribing, giving him a bit of encouragement, because he put a run of about 3 videos up, and then he's stopped. So whether it's because he hasn't had many views and it's discouraging him, I don't know. But he's well worth taking a look at his channel. Subscribe to him, and it might prompt him to put some more videos up. Anyway, what you see now in front of you is all my unpainted Peter Pig figures that are suitable for the Russian Civil War. Now, I have painted up an awful lot of these. I put up a sort of battle report on a Russian Civil War game some time ago, and you can see the amount of figures that I still have to paint. They do such a wide, massive range. By far and away, to my mind, the best 15mm Russian Civil War range out there. But I've still got to paint all the things like the chankers, the trolleys with the wagons with the machine guns on them. I've got loads of Putilov armoured cars, lots of cavalry. So I'm a bit of a slow painter of cavalry, but red cavalry, white cavalry. These are from their World War I range, but these are French tanks that the White Russians use. Lots of artillery, all kinds of stuff. There's these pieces here, got quite a few of these, are markers that you would put, sorry, I haven't got it on camera, markers that you would put on the dots joining up the grid. So they're kind of generic pieces of scenery, but they're intended really more for World War I than anything else. But there are fences, shattered trees, bits of wall, bits of brick. Oh, the figures are falling out here, so let's take them out of the bag as the bag seems to have opened of its own accord. There's a little civilian figure there, pointing in some direction. He might even be a downed, you know what he might be, a downed pilot. I think he is. He looks like he's wearing kind of flying gear. Dead cow. Say bits of fence, bits of breaking down trees. There's a wheel there against a bit of brickwork. So I've got quite a few of those. So I mean, some of those would even do for the Western game, wouldn't they? I mean, a tree is a tree. It could be stricken by lightning or something. But that would do for the Western game. But as I say, that does appeal. It's just that I deliberately avoided buying any armies because I just know you can just see what I'm like. I just buy these things and then they sit in boxes for years before I get around to painting them. I think the artillery crew, those guys. Lots of artillery. I know there were some there's some Czech Legion in here somewhere as well. I've got loads to do. But in terms of the rules I use, I was quite. I found in that battle report I did. I used black powder, an amalgam of black powder and a game called Red Actions, and that worked very well. But if I were to move on and play square bashing proper set in the First World War, I couldn't use that amalgam because the cards were specific to troop types that fought in the Russian Civil War, which is why I bought a new copy of Square Bashing, because if I ever get round to wargaming World War One, and I have been, my interest in it has been piqued in the recent past with the centenary and so on, and the documentaries on television. So it is a period again that I would like to wargame one day. Anyway, let's crack on with another bag. I'm just going to pause the video for a second, restart it, because I'm getting close to half an hour. There we go. You shouldn't notice any break in transmission there, but if I let the thing run over half an hour, sometimes there's a gap in the audio track. Another bag of, they're the same, the markers for the squares there. Right, in here, I've hardly painted any of these. This is, I picked these up at Salute one year, but these are Peter Pig, mainly Peter Pig. There's some Old Glory in here, 15mm Samurai, and again that was another period and range that really took grabbed my attention. And then I painted up about 24 cavalry. Took me quite a long time, and then never painted any more. And again, I will get around to it someday. These are the squares that they do for they're the correct size for to base them in groups. So they might come in handy if I get around to doing the Western game. But yeah, loads in here. Such a lot of stuff. The Maku screens. Make a nice camp if you were going to paint these up for something like DBX type game. Arquebusiers there. All types of stuff. And the Old Glory, I bought this because it was a nice command set. I've never got around to painting it, but it's the Maku screen, and it's got lots of various characters and so on. But I've not heard good things about Old Glory's 15mm Samurai. Apparently they're very fiddly to put together and so on. So I would much prefer to use these Peter Pig ones when I do finally get around to doing it. Let's put these away and crack on. Yeah, so I was going to talk about bit on the theme of why we hoard, and one reason is that you buy a set of rules, something I didn't mention last time. So you buy a set of rules and then immediately buy the figures to go with it, and then it fades into the background before you get a chance to actually paint the figures. So you can see how that happens with that Western set of rules. But another reason was it was Fraser von Ketteringham who made me think of it, because we bumped into him at I bumped into Nigel Darkling Eldridge Festival when I was wandering around with him, and then we bumped into Fraser, and he was going through a load of figures, and he made the remark that since he's got married, he finds it much harder to smuggle his purchases in through the front door, and that is another reason why I've got so many figures. Is I've never been married, never had to kind of make allowances for budgeting for other people's interests and tastes and so on. So wives and partners do act as a kind of block, a very necessary block. So I've never had that restraint. So that's a kind of negative reason. Not having someone to control your expenditure. Right, what's in here? Right now, I mentioned earlier about how much I like Peter Pig's AK-47 rules, and I have got a vast number of figures for that, but I've still got all these to do. Absolutely, that's some kind of anti-aircraft gun, lots of Toyota trucks. So these are modern African wars, tons and tons and tons of them. Yeah, it's a bit difficult unless I'd had the catalogue handy. I can't tell you what they all are. Casualty figures. They look like professionals wearing sort of tropical hats and so on. AK-47, if you've never played it, it is a really good game. I mean, it's set in such a kind of nasty period. You know, these sort of atrocities and the horrors of wars in Africa. But the rules and the permutations of forces that you can put together, and the individual kind of characterisation of your armies as you make them, and the way the game plays, it's so fast to play and so unpredictable. Really good game to play. That funny enough, I was talking to Nigel about this, why sometimes there are certain conflicts that we just choose to avoid because they have too much sort of significance to you as a gamer. So some people won't play the Vietnam War or something like that. But yeah, this sorry, it's just mesmerised by the huge number of figures that I've wanted to paint up and never got around to. No, so far never got around to painting. Some kind of Jeep there. Right, there's an awful lot more. How long have we going? About 2/3 of the way through this box. What else happened? Oh, I'll tell you what, on the subject of the Russian Civil War, going back to that for a moment, the games at Selwig were they're not up to the standard of Salute. There was one game there that I did see at Salute. It was a raid on Zeebrugge, but most of the games are kind of they're games that clubs put on, and a lot of hard work gone into them, but they're not visually, they're not as appealing as some of the demo games and that you see at Salute. But there was one particular game, and it was a Russian Civil War game, and something that I've never thought of doing. And although it wasn't to look at, it wasn't much. In that it's a very flat table, and the scale was so small that the riverbanks had a lot of detail in them, but you had to get close up to them to see the detail, and they put a lot of work into it. So they'd used a lot of irregular scenery from irregular miniatures, like little railway lines and buildings and so on. They had got all that. It was a Russian Civil War riverine action. So as I said before, I play American Civil War riverine, and I play Russian Civil War in 15mm. This was a 1/600th scale Russian Civil War riverine game, and they'd got all their boats from a company called PT Dockyard from America, all specific to the Russian Civil War, and I had no idea. It never occurred to me that so much had gone on Russia's rivers during the war. But there were all kinds of monitors and paddle steamers that had been armoured and so on, as well as more up-to-date type of vessels. And it really struck me as it being another really interesting game to play. So I thought that was the most interesting game there, even though it probably wouldn't have won any prizes for visual impact. And the two chaps that were there playing it were very keen to interact with you when you stopped to talk. They had a lot of planes that they had purchased from Tumbling Dice, and nice models of blimps as well. I'll try and put some pictures up of that. Right. Yeah. On the subject of the Japanese samurai, this is a box of buildings in 15mm from Oshiro. So these are sort of sitting here unpainted, but I thought they would make really nice scenery for a Japanese game when I do finally get around to doing it. I also purchased a lot of little cherry trees and things like that, but because they're already, they don't need painting or anything like that, they're already up in my scenery cupboard waiting to be played with. But these will paint up really nicely. The Shiro is another really good manufacturer. They do buildings in 28mm as well for the Orient, but they also do other things. They do sort of Victorian dockyards and stuff like that. I think the guy originally was an architectural modeller and designer, so his buildings are particularly fine. So there's all that. I'll obviously put these in the same box so that I had them in the same area when I did get round to painting up the figures. And then finally, here is a bag full of other buildings, not related to the Peter Pig figures, but they're just in here to save. And there's obviously a bit of room, a bit of spare room that I could take up. Now these, I don't think this company exists anymore. It's called Little Green Man. I'll get them all out. Now I might actually take some of these out of their bags and show you, because I've never actually unpacked these. I got them from Salute in 2009. If the bag is appropriate, if it's the appropriate bag. And the reason I think I got these right at the end of the show, and I hadn't spent all my cash that I'd taken, and these caught my eye, and I think they were offering them at a reduced price or something. There was an offer on them, and at the time, another period that I have figures for in another box somewhere, and you will see one day on a future episode, never got around to painting, was 28mm Pirates. And these buildings I thought looked right for a kind of Caribbean. They've got a vaguely kind of Hispanic look to them. So it's also occurred to me I might one day be able to use them for the Mexican Revolution, which I have figures for. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So here's a church. I think you can see what I mean. It looks sort of, it could be Mediterranean, but it could also be Caribbean, South America, something like that. But I thought it would do for a town that the pirates raid. I might as well go for it and open them all up and have a look at them all. As I say, I just buy them, bring them home, straight in a box, never unpack them. And what was that, 2009, so that was 9 years ago, nearly a decade before they even get a breath of air. Just going to go get a penknife. Right, here we go. It's going to help me to get the staples out of the But as I said on the other episode, one of the reasons I do hoard is that you buy things when they're available, and these buildings, as far as I know, I've never seen them since. I've never seen them on the internet. I'm pretty sure the firm doesn't exist anymore, and that's a great shame, because I think they're full of character, these buildings. It would do for the peninsula as well, wouldn't it, for Napoleonic Peninsula. It would do for Italy in the Second World War. I think they're great. Why on earth is it taking me so long to appreciate them? Bear with me and I'll get them all out of the bags. Nice one with a kind of overhanging eaves of the house. That would paint up really beautifully, I think. Obviously you can't remove the roofs to put figures inside, but you don't always need to. Lovely, they're really nice. Wonder what happened to them. Wonder why. Maybe they are still in business. I don't know, but I've never heard of them since. They're called Little Green Man. I've got two others here. When you have such a large amount of unpainted models and figures, you do begin to forget what you've got. I mean, I have occasionally replicated my purchases. I certainly wouldn't have done with something like this, but you do occasionally think, oh yeah, I need that, and you've already got it in my hoard. But it's great fun just going through these things sometimes and coming to them fresh. It's absolutely great. Look, there's even a little, that's obviously a window onto a subterranean cellar or something like that. Yeah, it would do for anything with a kind of Hispanic type of flavour, like the Iberian Napoleonics. It would do for the Spanish Civil War. Do for the Mexican Revolution, or pirates. A sort of Port Royal on Jamaica or something like that. Last one. Had a great time up in London as well. I'll talk about that on another episode sometime. Some of the places I visited or revisited, and I've already put up a video on Crystal Palace. The park is a really interesting park to go around in its own right, and I think a lot of people go to the show and don't realise what's right beside them in the show. It's a really interesting, lot of history in the park, and I've already put up a video on the dinosaurs that were erected there in the 1850s, right at the beginning of the science of paleontology, and it was the first fossils were being examined, and they put up these impressions of what they thought the dinosaurs would have looked like. That's worth going around it. So I put a short video up on that already. Alright, there we go, that's the final building. Yeah, so I don't know really how. Do chimneys give it away? The chimneys obviously make it a slightly later period than medieval. So I would say you could use that from anything from the sort of 17th century through to the 20th, really. I mean, if you go somewhere like Tuscany, you'll still see buildings like that today in the more quaint and picturesque towns of Italy. So yeah, must get around to painting those. As I say about all this lot. And that is it. That is everything in that box. So that's getting on for an hour already, me wittering away. So thanks very much for watching again, and hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you on another episode of Mountain Ramble in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching.